Hi, it's that fantasy chick. It's back again with another stream. It's Wednesday. Um, Today we're going to talk about the X Files. I've been rewatching the X Files. It's the 30th year anniversary of the X Files, and it's on Freebie. So I've been doing a rewatch. So I've watched episodes 7 through 12. But before I get to that, there has been some Aquaman 2 drama. So, and you know how I love mess. So let's get into the Aquaman 2 drama. I got an article from Variety this time. You know, I'm normally on the Hollywood Reporter, but this time it's an article on Variety. Okay. Do-do-do-do-do-do. There's the picture of all the players involved. There's the director. There's Amber Heard, Jason Momoa. There's Elon Musk, who found himself in the middle of this mess because he just takes mess wherever he goes. Aquaman 2 flooded with drama. Love the puns. Jason Momoa allegedly drunk on set. Amber Heard scenes cut. Elon Musk's letter to WB and more. These waters are getting choppy. Why can't these trades stay away from the puns? Why do they do all the puns? On the same day in mid September that Warner Brothers dropped the trailer for its $215 million Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, embarrassing documents from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial surfaced on Reddit, creating a new headache for the studio behind the film. Depp fans paid the court fees for the release of documents from Heard's therapist, Dr. Don Hughes. The raw notes scribbled on a legal pad were part of last year's high-profile trial in which Depp largely prevailed. They describe a hostile Aquaman set where an allegedly intoxicated Jason Momoa, dressed like Depp and pushed to have Heard booted from the role of aquatic superhero Mara. Jason said he wanted me fired, the notes say. Jason drunk, late on set, dressing like Johnny, has all the rings too. Now, if this ain't true, then Jason could sue her as well. A rep for Momoa declined comment, but a DC spokesperson pushed back on Heard's characterization, saying Jason Momoa conducted himself in a professional manner at all times on the set of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Others echoed the sentiment. Jason works his ass off, likes to have a beer once in a while like everyone, but doesn't show up drunk to set, says an insider who was on the London set in 2021, adding that the two stars got along and were seen joking together. And he isn't dressing like Johnny Depp. He has always dressed in that bohemian style. So the heifer's lying. Heard declined comment, but a source close to the actress confirmed that the notes referred to the Aquaman 2 set and reflect a session from December 27, 2021. Another source close to the actress says her lawyers fought the release of the therapy notes because they knew she was lying, and which had been subpoenaed by Depp's attorneys during discovery. Momoa wasn't the only Aquaman principal to land in the crosshairs. The therapy session also painted a picture of Heard feeling unsupported by the film's director, James Wan, and treated like a pariah because of her high-profile legal battle with her ex-husband. He raised his voice at me. I can't even post about Aquaman. Made it like it was my fault. I said, I'm sorry, say Hughes notes in reference to Juan. Nobody could take selfies with me on set given blackout. That had nothing to do, you can't, it was a blackout, meaning they didn't want images of the film getting out before the press, before they released images. That had nothing to do with you. Everything isn't about you. Oh my goodness. Juan declined comment. The DC spokesperson says James is known for treating members of his cast and crew with the utmost respect and for fostering a positive, collaborative environment on set. The Aquaman films were no exception. And yet Heard was nearly fired. Sources on both sides tell Variety. Following Aquaman's release in 2018, the studio and Juan decided to drop the actress from the sequel due to her lack of chemistry with Momoa and sent a letter to her attorney, Carl Austin, informing him of its decision. Former DC Films boss Walter Hamada testified in the defamation trial about the issue of chemistry. Those sources underscore that the move to bounce Heard was unrelated to Depp and took place before he filed suit against the actress in 2019. Likewise, Momoa was not involved in the decision making, but another source pushed back on the lack of chemistry narrative, noting that Heard did a chemistry test with Momoa before landing the role of Mara and beat out two other actresses who did a similar chemistry test, including Abby Lee. Ultimately, the studio never pulled the trigger on firing her because her former boyfriend, Elon Musk, had one of his litigators send a scorched earth letter to Warner Brothers, threatening to burn the house down if the actress wasn't brought back for a sequel, says a source familiar with the behind-the-scenes battle. Warner Brothers caved and moved forward with Heard. Musk did not respond to a request for comment. So basically, they was going to fire her, but Elon Musk is the reason why we're dealing with her right now. If it wasn't for Elon Musk, the owner of X, or shall I say Twitter, because I'm not calling it X, it's Twitter. Scorched earth. He's a joke. Anyway, the drama is being rehashed at a time when DC Entertainment toppers James Gunn and Peter Safran are poised to close the book of the previous regime's superhero slate with the December 20th release of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Since Warner Brothers chiefs Pam Abdy and Mike DeLuca joined the studio in June 2022, followed by Gunn and Safran's interest 4 months later, the four have been saddled with DC duds they inherited, including this year's The Flash, 270. Sorry, The Flash, 271 million, 271 million worldwide, and Blue Beetle, the 128 million worldwide. Still, the Aquaman sequel held promise, considering that the character's first outing earned 1.15 billion worldwide, becoming the highest grossing DC movie ever. But sources say the sequel has endured challenges outside of the Heard saga and was testing in the 60s before being recut in the summer of 2022. Despite the overhaul, the film continued to test in the 60s. Dang. Prompting a new cut. Man, this is not looking good. The movie is like this echo of regime, says one insider. It's the last remnant of the Snyderverse, and no one really wants to take ownership of it. Reshoots took place right up until this year's WGA strike in May. The on-set source disputes the idea that Aquaman 2 is troubled, noting that the film was on time, under budget, and needed only about a week of reshoots. Like Flash, Aquaman can't shake his lame duck trappings, with the DC universe getting overhauled under new leadership, marking Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav's top priority. In fact, none of the stars cast by Zack Snyder for 2016's Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice and 2017's Justice League, including Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Ezra Miller, and Momoa, will reprise their roles in the new DC universe and character. Momoa may return, just not as Aquaman. Sources say the actor has engaged in talks to play Lobo, either in the 2025 reboot Superman Legacy, written and directed by Gunn, or in a standalone film. In a confusing twist, Viola Davis, who played Amanda Waller in both of the recent Suicide Squad movies, will remain as the character in the Gunn Saffron DC Universe in next year's Max series, Waller, and possibly in the new Superman tempo. Another outlier is Gunn's Max series Peacemaker, which will be back for a second season with John Cena in the lead. There was a reason why she did not want those notes to get out. She was lying. so she lied about Jason, she lied about James, but they was like, oh, but she was about to be fired. If it wasn't for Elon and him writing a scorched earth letter to the WB, she would have been dropped. Okay. So that's another reason to dislike Elon Musk. But anyway, that's all right. I heard that they cut down her screen time in the second movie. It's like, okay, you can force us to keep her on, but you can't force us to extend her time. So her time has been her screen time has been cut way down. Way down is what I heard. It's more about him and his brother, apparently. So, and that's all I know. Because I don't watch trailers. Moving on to the X-Files. Okay. So I watched six more episodes of season 1. So episode 7 to episode 12. And these episodes were more Monster of the Week episodes. There was one episode that sort of fit into the alien lore. There was one episode that was about a UFO crash, and it was about a UFO crash, and it was about a UFO crash, and it was about Mulder sneaking onto the site and taking pictures. Of course, he gets caught right away. And back then, this was before digital cameras. They took his film out the camera and exposed it to the light to ruin the film, and and detained him and got him in trouble with his bosses at the FBI and all this other stuff, because supposedly it was a contaminated site. It was a quarantine site because it was contaminated. It was radiation or contamination. It was supposed to be a train wreck, and Mulder was like, "Ain't with no train wreck. I don't care about your lie. It wasn't no train wreck. I wasn't putting nobody in danger by being there. It's like, I'm there about the truth." So he of course, when they set him free, he of course did not go home. He stuck around, and he ran into he when he was being detained, he was there with some other guy who was asking, like, who are you with, da 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 da, who was obviously somebody else who was all about who was sneaking around UFO crash sites. So who was trying to get the same type of information that Mulder was getting. So Mulder looked that guy up, and um, I don't know how, but somehow Mulder, I think it was because of he had some markings. He had like some scars behind his ears that Mulder was like, he's seen those scars in the X Files, from other abductees, alien abductees. This guy had no idea he had been abducted. He had never even mentioned it, but he was like, Mulder was like, he's been abducted. This is probably why he's been having seizures and all these things and blah 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 blah. And there was so the UFO crash site. The reason why they were trying to clean up the crash site, but they were also trying to catch the alien. So the alien was on the loose, and they didn't show the alien. They had it that the alien was camouflaged like a predator. You could sort of see it moving, like sort of chameleon, like, sort of camouflaged, like in with the surroundings, but it was invisible. So it was like invisible but camouflaged with the surroundings, and it was moving around. But like they had set up all these boundaries, these what do you call those red those things that when you break the alarm goes off, and he went straight through there and nothing happened, because of course he's an alien. It's not going to affect him the same way it affects us. You don't know you don't know what his biology or what his makeup is. You have no idea how to track this dude, which is why you're never gonna catch him. But apparently there was another UFO hovering over the town where he was, waiting to get him. But he was going to catch up to get the homeboy, with the scars behind his ears. He was going to get him first. So Mulder was trying to get to him before the alien got to him. He got to him just in time, but the alien snatched him up, and Mulder saw him hovering in the air in this light while the aliens were doing whatever they were doing to him. And then think I think he disappeared. I think he eventually disappeared with them. But it kills me whenever stuff like this happens. Mulder is like the only person to see it. Only person to see it. Scully never sees what Mulder sees. So he, she can continue to be skeptical because she never sees what he sees. But except for this one episode where the computer was going around murdering people, that episode, she didn't believe him when he was telling her, I think the computer is murdering people. And she didn't believe him. She was like, I think you're trying to see what you want to see, until the computer targeted her and started coming after her. And then she was like, okay, what do we do? So tried to sneak into the building and slip the computer a virus so it can destroy the computer, because the guy who created the computer just confessed to the murders, because he would rather go to jail for the murders than have the government snatch him up and try to use his artificial intelligence, that he created as a weapon, because that's what they've been trying to get his artificial intelligence that he's been created and use it as a weapon for years, and he's denied them. So now that they got him in jail, they're gonna try to, they like, we got you now. It's like you can either go to jail or we can set you free. And Mulder destroyed the only evidence that could, you know, prove that he was innocent, because he put a virus on the computer and destroyed it, or so they thought, because the episode ends and then the computer wakes back up. So it may or may not still be alive. But the government is trying, but at the time it was waking up, the government was basically trying to see if there was anything left, if there was anything salvageable. But it was like, oh, it's all gone, all is lost, all is lost. But there was a lot of, I said, okay, there was a lot of murderous things. So there was a computer that murdered people. Then they went to Alaska, and there were some people who had drilled down into the ice and found something that had been in the ice for, millions of years. And in there were worms that had got into the people. And once the worms entered into the people, it made the people want to kill everybody else. So the worms made people murder each other until it was down to the last two people. And I guess they figured the only way to keep this from getting out, and because they were in Alaska, they were isolated. So to keep this from getting out into the wider world, they killed themselves so it wouldn't spread. But of course, the government sent a bunch of scientists and doctors and Mulder and Scully to investigate to see what happens. And of course, one by one, people start dying. But they eventually figured out it's the worms. Well, they figured out it was the worms right away, but they couldn't figure out how to cure. What was the cure? Eventually, they figured out that two worms in the same host would murder each other. They couldn't take being in the same host. So if you have a worm inside of you, then you would have to put another worm inside of you again, and those two worms would murder each other, and then you'd be cured. Crazy. And Mulder, of course, was believing these worms were not terrestrial. So he wanted to come back and study them. And dude was like, dude, the 30 minutes after we left, they torched the whole place. He was like, oh, the government. I'm like, dude, these worms were making people murder people. Why would you want to study that? Alien or not, some things need to be left alone. Mulder. Okay. Then there was now this one I remember, even though I've probably only seen it once, but this one was the one about the astronaut, because I remember this thing, the face coming at him from the ceiling, and him being in outer space, and there's something like him being an astronaut and something coming from outer space coming back with him, and basically possessing him. And they basically, what they were saying was, all of those sort of, um, what do you call it? They were doing like a Forrest Gump thing, where they were saying all of these space disasters that have happened since, like, like the Challenger and all these other things happened. They were trying to say that he sabotaged all those space missions and things like that. So all these space missions that that went bad, he sabotaged them because of whatever possessed him when he that came back with him from outer space. And he it's one of those things where he couldn't control it, and he couldn't go to somebody up to somebody and be like, yes, I'm possessed. But at the same time, it's almost like his subconscious was fighting it. So he was subconsciously aware that something was with him. So subconsciously he would send clues to somebody else that this stuff was going on, and that person brought in Mulder and Scully, so they can investigate, and that's how they found out what was going on, and blah 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 blah. And they thought that um I think they thought that they got him, but I think he ended up killing himself in the end, which was kind of crazy. I think in the end they thought they saved him, but he ended up killing himself in the end. Um, do do. Oh, now this one was about these. There was these men who died these mysterious deaths, and they died thousands of miles apart, but in the exact same way, and both their daughters were there, you know, when with them when they died. And when they went to each one to interview the daughters looked exactly alike. So they was trying to figure out what is going on. Turns out the daughters were not their daughters, they were clones. They both of their wives got pregnant through in vitro fertilization, and there was a doctor there doing experiments, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, these girls were clones of the doctor. She was a clone herself. She was from um, this experiment that had happened I don't know how long ago it was, but she was part of an experiment that happened when she was a young girl. But the experiment kept going wrong because they kept turning out, you know, violent and crazy and blah 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 blah. So these little girls this had found each other, and they had plotted the deaths of their fathers. And one of the things about the deaths of both the men, they happened at the exact same time. So they not only plotted to kill their fathers, they plotted to murder them at the exact same time. It's murderous little heifers. And so in the end, they figured out, okay, first they thought the girls were victims because after the fathers were murdered, they were kidnapped. The clone kidnapped them. But she kidnapped them because she realized they had murdered their father, and she knew that they had found each other, and that they were super smart, and that they were starting to, to get these violent tendencies like the other experiments. And all the experiments names were they cloned a bunch of girls and a bunch of boys, and all the boys' name were Adam, and all the girls' name were Eve. So they were Eves 9 and 10, because that's how many Eves there were. So she had found them and brought them together and was like, okay, well, I can help you, I can make you better. But they ended up murdering her. And when Scully and Mulder um, busted in, they acted all innocent, like, oh my goodness, she tried to kill us, blah, 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 blah. And they believed them until they tried to murder Scully and Mulder. So in the end, they ended up in a psych asylum with the other Eve. And then there was one last Eve who was on the loose, and she comes into the asylum, and they make it seem like she's gonna bust out the little girls, but they sort of leave it like you don't know whether or not she gets the girls out, but she's sort of there to get them out. So you're like, she may bust them out. And then the last episode I saw was this episode about, okay, these British politicians kept bursting out into flames. And it turns out they would burst out to flames, or things would just go up into, things would burn down or go up into flames. And they realized somebody was going around causing these fires because of who they were, and because of something politically that they were trying to do. So there was this one politician who was possibly, because of the other politicians who had gone up in flames, he was the next logical person to be in danger. So they decided to take him and bring him to Boston. I think it was Boston. He had a house in Boston, I think. And before they get there, the guy who was doing it was somebody who can make fire happen, just come out of his fingers. He can just make fire appear out of his body. And when they get to Boston, he's already there in the house saying, oh, I'm the caretaker. I'm the caretaker of the estate. So they're stuck there with them. Eventually, what happened in this episode? A lot of stuff happened. Oh, the main person who brought the case to Scully and Mulder was somebody with Scotland Yard, who went to school with Mulder, because Mulder went to school. He went to Oxford. Mulder graduated from Oxford. And this was a woman, an old flame of his, who messed around with his heart. And she was nothing but a little trifling heifer, because she played around with his heart this time too. She was, flirting with him and dancing with him and kissing him. And then the next thing you know, when he figured out who the actual murderer is, he's running into the house to tell him who it is, and she's kissing the dude, the politician, the married politician. She's kissing him. We're like, chick, you trifling heifer. But Mulder was like, whatever. For whatever reason, not for whatever reason, the driver got sick, and he didn't show up. So the caretaker Did I say driver? No, the driver got sick, and then the caretaker said, "I'll drive you to," they had to go into the city for something. So when Scully and Mulder saw him, they saw him as the driver. So when they figured out who he was, they were like, "Oh, the driver's the murderer." And it was like, "We can't believe the driver's the murderer. He's been our driver for like, 15 years." And then finally they was like, "That's not the driver, that's the caretaker." And so they got them out of the house, but their two young sons were locked in a room. And another thing we found out about Mulder is he has this crippling fear of fire that I don't know why this was a thing. Of course, anybody would be frightened of fire, but he has a crippling fear of fire. So he was the only one left in the house to go get these boys, and they was just stuck in the room, beating the door down, and he was too scared to move. And I was like, "Well, don't just stand there and listen to the boys burn to death. It's like, get over yourself and open the door." So finally, he opened the door and got them outside. And then the little murderer was coming down the stairs, and Scully had a gun on him, but he was like, "You're not gonna shoot me because you don't know if I'm gonna like if shooting me will light up this whole house." I was like, I would have took the chance. But that's just me. I would have shot him. But what ended up happening was the Scotland Yard chick ended up coming around the corner and throwing accelerant on him. I was like, that's the next best thing. He ran outside. He had this accelerant on him. So he just goes up and flames and burns up. But because he's made of fire, he doesn't die. He just has like, I don't know, 6-degree burns or whatnot. They put him in a hyperbaric chamber, and they take everything out of his room, so there's nothing flammable in his room because things keep catching on fire. And they're like, he is he's healing. They were like, he's going to be healed in a month. So I'm like, well, how are you going? It's like the liver dude, the guy going around eating people's livers. How are you going to? How are you going to? Are you going to keep him in that hyperbaric chamber for the rest of his life? How are you going to keep him locked up? You're going to have to keep him in the special prison or keep him in a special chamber so he can't, burn the place down and get out. What are you going to do? But, crazy. Okay, so those are all the episodes of the X-Files that I've watched. So tomorrow's another episode of Loki. So that's what I'll be talking about on Monday. I'll be talking about that on Monday. Friday is going to be a Game of Thrones video. So Friday, a Game of Thrones video. And Monday, we'll talk about another episode of Loki. So that is all. But in the meanwhile, thanks for watching.